Hello, my name's Julian Edgar and I'm the author of this book, Vehicle Ride and Handling, Testing, Modification and Development. The topic of this video? Look, this book covers material you'll find in no other book on suspension. Let's take a look. So people write in and they invariably suggest that I should read a certain book on suspension. I think they're well-meaning, but what they don't realise is I'm almost certainly got that book already. If we look down the photo on the left, there are my books just on suspension and vehicle dynamics. So one of the huge benefits of doing that type of research, having read all of those books, having those books in my library, is I can put into my book stuff that you'll find nowhere else. And that's a really critical point. If I want you to buy the book, why should you buy this one and not just buy all those older ones that have been available for, in some cases, 50 years? So the first thing is my book covers both ride and handling. Now, if you're driving a road car, ride is absolutely critical. You feel the ride quality every time you drive the car. It doesn't matter if you're just driving down to the shops or you're driving a very long trip. Ride quality is part of the way you experience the car all the time. Now, that's incredibly important because anyone can get a car handling well. It's really easy. But what is incredibly difficult is to get the car both handling well and having a decent ride quality. And so if you're driving a road car, having coverage in the book of both of these aspects becomes absolutely vital in terms of getting a car you can live with and happily live with. This book covers both ride and handling. Secondly, and this really amazed me when I was doing the research for the book, almost no book on vehicle dynamics, vehicle suspension covers steering. Yeah, it's incredible. They just pretend that steering doesn't exist. And yet steering, and especially steering response, how quickly the car turns in, for example, and steering feel are both critical to a good handling car. If the car does not respond adequately to steering inputs and you can't feel through the steering what the car is doing, the car, almost by definition, is not handling very well. And yet other books simply don't cover it. I've got a full chapter on steering and I've also got coverage of steering feel. And as far as I'm aware, that's the only book in the world that actually covers this incredibly vital topic. So what is good handling? What makes a car handle well? It's a lot more than just grip. And yet if you read all those other books on this topic, they just skim past it. They don't actually define what good handling actually is. And again, that's incredible. How can you know what you're chasing if you're not actually defining what it is that you're chasing? So I think it's crazy how other books on ride and handling, vehicle suspension, don't ever actually define what good handling is. Obviously, from what I've been saying, my book does. It has a full chapter on both subjective and objective evaluation of handling, and it also covers all those handling terms that I think you need to know, a lot more than just understeer and oversteer. Seats, again, not covered in any other books. Now, why are seats so important in a book on vehicle suspension, on ride and handling? Well, obviously, I hope it's obvious, seats make a huge difference to ride quality. They're part of the suspension. They're a series spring and damper that actually affects how you feel impacts over bumps. But seats are also really important for handling. If you're sliding around in the seat, holding onto the steering wheel, you can't steer very accurately. You can't apportion steering inputs the way you really should be. But seats aren't covered in other books. In my book, I actually cover how to modify seats, how to look at what you want in terms of seat support, in terms of seat comfort, both the support vertically and support laterally. I think seats are a critical part of good handling cars. And using modern tools. What modern tools, you might be thinking? Well, a smartphone with a simple app has the ability to help you a great deal in setting up suspension. It can measure natural frequencies. Now, people always look a bit confused and puzzled or misuse the term when the idea of natural frequencies comes up. But to put it really straightforwardly, it allows you to compare suspension stiffness provided by the springs between different cars. It allows you to compare the front stiffness versus the rear stiffness, or the stiffness of the front and rear versus the stiffness of another car. It's an independent measuring stick of suspension stiffness, independent of spring stiffness, independent of motion ratio, and independent of the weight that actually acts through that corner. So it's a brilliant tool for making comparisons and also for making aiming points. What suspension stiffness are you actually after? But a smartphone can do a lot more than that. It can also give an indication of damping ratios, and it can also measure certain aspects of ride quality. There is no other book on ride and handling or suspension that covers how to use a smartphone in this way. And once you start using it, you'll think, gee, this is really useful. Why isn't everyone doing this? It's covered in the book. Another one. Nearly all cars these days are front-wheel drive, and yet very few books, there is one or two, but very few books cover front-wheel drive handling. And no books that I'm aware of, cover all-wheel drive handling. And yet, when you put your foot down in a rear-wheel drive car, it's likely to power oversteer. In a front-wheel drive car, it's likely to power understeer. And in an all-wheel drive car, whether it power understeers or power oversteers depends on the way the torque split works. And so the actual handling of each of those driveline configurations is quite different. Clearly, if you're setting up an all-wheel drive, you set it up differently to if you're setting up a rear-wheel drive. If you're setting up an all-wheel drive, it's a different kettle of fish yet again. So if you look at those other books and you want guidance on your driveline, unless you've got a rear-wheel drive car, you're likely not to have anything there that will suit you. This book has chapters on front-wheel drive, a chapter on rear-wheel drive, and a chapter on all-wheel drive. And modern handling technology. And when I say modern, not really that modern. We've had cars with variable torque splits for well over 20 years, probably 30 if you look closely enough. So modern handling technology like active anti-roll or sway bars, active damping, electronically controlled damping, that's been around for a very long time, active torque split, none of these things are covered in other books. But if your car has all of those or any of those, they become absolutely intrinsic to the way you go about modifying your car. For example, if your car has electronic damping control and there is a plug-in aftermarket ECU for that system, you've suddenly got the ability to tune those dampers. If your car has an active torque split and you've got a plug-in available controller for that, again, you can change all that. Now, that might sound complicated, but it's no more complicated than programmable engine management. And furthermore, if you've got a car with those facilities, it can actually be a lot cheaper and more effective to modify the electronics first. Find that in other books, it's not covered. It's as if none of that actually exists. And one final slide. Look, my book covers all the fundamentals as well. It covers springs, it covers bump stops, it covers sprung and unsprung weight. It covers spring specifications, it covers motion ratios, it covers natural frequencies. It covers measuring suspension natural frequencies, it covers damping, it covers suspension and steering pivots, it covers virtual swing arms, virtual centres, roll axes, anti-dive, anti-lift, and so on and so on. Now, it's my opinion that it covers those in a more simple and accessible way than basically any book that's out there, but that's for you to make your judgment. But it's important to realise, and that's all just in chapter 1, it's important to realise my book does cover all of those fundamentals as well as those other areas that I have been talking about. So the book's called Vehicle Ride and Handling, Testing, Modification and Development. With respect, if you're about to write in and say, oh, have you read Pune, or have you read Smith, or have you read even Millikan? Yes, I have. I've read all of those, and they're all good books, but this book covers material you will not find in any of those other books. Vehicle Ride and Handling, Testing, Modification and Development. It's available from Amazon in your country right now. Thank you.